Hello dear channel, welcome to this quick video. This video is for a customer who bought the ultimate procedural gems for cycles, and he needs to learn how to tweak some materials. In this case, it's going to be the lapis lazuli here. So I'm going to show how to make some tweaks to the colors, by example, or remove some inclusions. Then he needs to do that also with the coral right here. And then he needs to learn how to tweak the citrine quartz and the amethyst quartz. The quartz materials actually are some exception in the asset. Two reasons. If you look at the citrine quartz, you'll see that this gemstone has three different materials applied to it. That's to achieve the variations in the colors, the cracks on the inside, and the other inclusions, the other flaws. So we have in fact three materials to achieve that. It's much the same with the amethyst. The only thing I made different in the asset so people can understand right from the beginning that the geometry affects the look of the mineral is that here I kept the geometry separated. We have the cabochon quartz, that's the oval polished outside shape of the gem. Then we have some cracks on the inside. So I'm going to show that here. These are planes going through and through the gem. And then we have another set of geometry, a bit smaller here, different planes to achieve the cracks. So also each part, three parts, each with one different material. This customer needs to make beads, citrine beads and amethyst beads. And actually that's quite interesting because they're pretty common gems on the market to make a necklace, by example. So you can buy an entire citrine or amethyst beads necklace. Then you can do whatever you want with the beads. And the beads are perforated. So also, if you want to recreate the beads in 3D, obviously they are spheres, but don't forget a couple of things. The beads are never really perfect spheres. So you might want to sculpt or affect the surface of your sphere slightly to achieve a better result. And also the beads are perforated, obviously, because the wire must come inside the beads. And if there's no hole there, there's no way to put them together. Okay, so you might want to make the perforation also in 3D. And that means that you need to make some modeling to achieve a higher level of realism. Okay, so we're going to do that in this tutorial. Let's get started. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Take the lapis lazuli, let's go to shading. What we have on one side is the inclusions, and on the other side, the colors. So if I come here, that's where the colors and the inclusions mix. So if we want to remove the inclusions, we can plug this one here and they're gone. Here we have the mix shader for the colors and the inclusions. So let's say we want to keep the inclusions because generally for the realism, they're very important indeed. So the problem is not there. Then we have the marble effect. It's very slight, but let me show you the difference. What the marble effect does is that the lapis lazuli generally has some wider zones. Some part of the lapis lazuli are whiter than others. So this is what this part does here with the marble effect. So if I remove it, we already have a stronger blue. So maybe you want to remove that, or maybe you want that to be smaller or bigger. Or you can go to the marble effect group. So select the group and hit the tab key. Just like when you go to edit mode on a group node, you're going to go inside the group. So here inside the group, the marble effect group, we can tweak the color of the effect. So if you want the lapis lazuli to be a stronger blue, you want to edit this element here, the color, the base color of the marble effect. Then also the marble effect has a very slight bump map down here. Generally, you want to keep that. If you remove that, you're going to have a more polished lapis lazuli. Okay, so that's here inside the group. Okay, so here my lapis lazuli is already a stronger blue. So like I already explained to the customer, the color of any gemstone is going to depend a lot on the HDRI, the illumination you're using in your scene. So here the asset already has a provided HDR, so it looks good, okay? But obviously in your project, you might want to use another HDRI, but that's going to affect a lot the look of the gemstones because, well, that's how 3D works, because the light in your scene affect a lot the colors of the materials you see in your render. So here, the scene already has the HDRI and also has 3 area lights around the gemstones. 2 are rectangular area lights and the other one is a disc shape. You can see that very clearly in the reflections of this gemstone right here. So obviously when you're going to use some other lights in your project, the distance from the light, the power from the light, the HDRI is also going to affect a lot the look of the gemstones, the saturation, the hue of the color of the gemstone. Pretty obviously, you'll have to tweak the colors in your scene because you'll be using other lights and another HDRI. So here for the lapis lazuli, we already saw that the marble effect can affect a lot the strength of the blue color or whatever color you like. If you want to make it red, here we are. The marble effect is on top of the other color layers. Those colors are down here. Here you can see that we're mixing 2 different colors with some subsurface so we can tweak the colors furthermore. Okay, so here, if I put it red, we can see what this part of the material is affecting. Okay, so maybe I want that bluer, so I can tweak the subsurface color here and then the color here also. Maybe I want a lot more saturation, so the base color of the lapis lazuli gets a stronger blue, just like this one, okay? Then we have a darker blue to make the banding. Maybe I want it also lighter here and also more saturated here and also lighter here. So the lapis lazuli is a more even color. You can obviously also tweak the strength of the subsurface here or lower it and remove it. If you put it to 0, now you're only using the base colors here. So here, if I even out the hue and the RGB, here I can use the eyedropper tool and take the same blue. Then here, the variation of the colors is going to be basically 0. The variation is going to come from the marble effect and the mixing factor right up here. But basically, this lapis lazuli is now fully blue and a lot bluer than from what it started. Okay, so that was one gemstone, the lapis lazuli, the very famous and very pretty gemstone. And now we're going to see how to do that with the coral material. So the coral here is a disc. These are pretty often used for pendants and also in beads. So then again, this client needs to make coral beads. So they're perforated also. Coral generally is not totally opaque. So it means that it does have some slight transparency. So that's why also you want to perforate the beads in your 3D model. But we'll see that when we'll make the quartz because it's going to be a lot more obvious. Okay, so here for the coral material, we also have a subsurface in action. You can remove it and then it's totally red. Then we have some variation here in the color ramp. You might want to remove these and then it's completely the same red. Okay, so here we can remove the variations from the color ramp, or if you want 0 variation, because here we still have some mixing happening, just remove this, remove the subsurface completely right here and tweak the color you need for your coral right there. Maybe a darker red here or a lighter red, depends the lighting in your scene. And here, that's how you remove the color variations on the coral. So this tweak is a bit simpler because this material is a bit simpler. Okay, now we're going to make the beads, the quartz beads, the citrin beads, and the amethyst beads. So we're going to go to layout and we're going to model some beads. All right, so Let's add mesh UV sphere. Let's put 80 segments, 40 rings. Radius, let's go at 3. So this is going to make 6 millimeters bead. Let's have a shade smooth. Now, let's save as another file. Let's do that, saving to another file, so we don't affect the original asset file and don't lose any geometry or any material. You might want to avoid that. Okay, so now I'm going to add mesh plane here, aligned to the view so it faces us. Here, X-rays, let's go to edit mode. Let's make a merge at center. And okay, so here, the vertex, I'm going to move it by 0.4 on the z-axis, and I'm going to start extruding. I'm going to make the perforation of the bead, and here, important at the end, I'm going to smooth the entrance and the exit like this. Okay, here on the y-axis of the local axis, I want to be at 0. So do something like this shape. Now what we're going to do is add a modifier screw. We need to find the axis. It's going to be X for me here. Then the steps, well, depends your hardware. I'm going to make it pretty smooth. Then I'm going to make a mirror modifier here on the X-axis. And with this, I'm ready to make the Boolean on the sphere. So let's take the sphere, add modifier Boolean, solver fast from this plane element. Plane, we're going to call it cutter, bead, it cuts the bead right there. Okay, we have this. Always check that the Boolean is working properly. Here now we want the auto smooth. It's better for the shading. So this is the bead for the quartz citrine and the quartz amethyst. We need to see how to work with the 3 materials. So we'll have to make additional geometry here. Let's get to it. Okay, so let's go to render preview. This is going to come out gray because this bead has no material, and that's how it should be at first. So here we're going to assign the quartz amethyst, and this is what we got. So obviously, if you perforate the bead correctly, it's already looking pretty good. Now let's go to shading. Before we worked with the crack effects with an inside geometry, let's go to shading just to see how to tweak the colors. So zoom to the bead right there. So the color is right here at the top. Here we can affect directly the saturation and the hue. Maybe I want it bluer. So by tweaking this and the value also, you can get the color you need. In this case, this is pretty nice. So here we do have some variations to the color thanks to the color ramp. Okay, so if you don't want any variation, that can happen. I don't advise you to remove all the variations, honestly, but we're learning how to do it. So we have the color ramp right there. If you want to remove that effect, add an RGB color, select the main color here, this violet right there. So on the gray RGB here, take the eyedropper and select the same violet, and then plug the RGB to color. And now you don't have any variation of color except for the reflections, obviously, but that's due to the environment. So that's why I said the HDRI is going to change the look of your bead, of your gemstone a lot, because the environment is reflecting in those beads. And also now I remember that I mentioned that you should affect the surface of the sphere. Let's add a displace modifier, make a new texture, go to texture down here, and in the type up here, put it to Musgrave by example, and then go back to the displace modifier and adjust the strength. Something very low like this. And don't forget that you can change the size here of the Musgrave. Okay, so the beads in real life are mostly like this. 0.05. Okay, so let's put this before the Boolean and let's reactivate the Boolean. Okay, so this is going to be more interesting also for the realism of your render, of your product render. So this bead is looking pretty sweet already. So now we need to see how to work with the inner cracks variation materials. We need to create geometry inside of the bead. Let's see how we can do that for this example. Oh, and before I forget, let's see directly the citrine quartz. So let's assign the citrine quartz material here. And here we can see that the base color is here. It's very light. It's very close to white. So maybe you want to change the color ramp here. You need something more yellow. So the white here is affecting the entire bead. Let's bring some yellow to make it a lot more citrine-like, to make it a stronger, more saturated citrine. Come here and you get this. This is already pretty good, especially with the inclusions that this quartz already has. So now that I'm here, because the quartz has the frost effect already on it, there's something very important also for achieving the same effect, the dimensions. See here, I'm making the bead to a real life size. I made it 6 millimeters. Now, if you don't know, in Blender, here it says 6 meters. That's a Blender unit because in fact, in real life, if you export this bead for 3D printing, by example, you're not going to do that, but it's an example. It's going to come out 1,000 times smaller because 6 meters in Blender, in real life, it's going to be 6 millimeters. Okay, so the difference is 1,000. That's very important when you model in 3D for many effects to work, and they work very differently depending on the dimensions of your object and the scale of the object, especially if they don't have a special UV map, a UV map for your materials. The UV map is the proportions that a material is going to take if you're not using one. And here in the asset, I'm never using UV maps. So the effect all depends on the scale and dimensions of your object. So if you make it too small, let's say 10 times smaller. Okay, let's remove the Boolean for a second. Okay, so if I make it smaller, the scale of the effects is going to affect the look of my gemstone. Okay, because the material is responding to the dimensions of your object. So the material is going to look different depending the size, the scale, the dimensions of your object. That's something very important to understand. Okay, so let's put it back to scale 1, 6 meter, 6 millimeters in real life. That's something we all need to know here in Blender. So now you learn how to tweak the colors for the amethyst and the citrine quartz. But maybe you want to use the cracked materials. Obviously, that's why you bought the asset. So they're all included right here to add that touch of realism right there. So also the modeling of the bead is important here with the perforation. And if you know, I made the perforation at 0.8 millimeter. That's the normal size for the wire for most beads. Not all. Sometimes it's 1 millimeter, 1.1, 1.2, can be 0.9, can be 0.6, can be 0.7, can be 0.5. But most of the time, it's a 0.8 millimeter perforation in the beads. Well, maybe it depends your country. But here in Mexico, that's how it was all these years. Okay, let's work with the cracks. So on the bead, we're going to test directly. Okay, so here we have these two materials for the quartz. They're called for old quartz inner flaws and for old quartz internal colorations. So if we apply them to the bead like this, we can see what they do. This one makes some grooves, okay? And the other one makes other frosty effects. And if we want here, we can work on these colorations right here. So the inner frost effect also comes with colors. So you can tweak the coloration here. So if you want it for amethyst, let's go at 0.1. Here I put a lot of saturation. 5 is pretty good already. You can go higher. It will work in cycles. But obviously, if you don't want colors in the frost effect, remove that. But I'm going to keep it just for now. But anyway, let's put back the quartz amethyst here. That's the first layer, the first geometry. We're going to use the quartz amethyst, and we already learned how to tweak the color of the main layer of the quartz bead. Okay, now let's go to layout because we need more geometry to apply the frost effect and the other flaws. So what we want here, I'm going to copy the bead. So I'm going to copy it with the displacement, with the Boolean. I'm going to go to edit mode, and I'm going to scale it in edit mode. It's a bit easier. So I'm going to make it smaller like this. And maybe what I can do, because here we have to be creative, we can be creative, but I would say that we have to be creative. We can take some parts. So let's have the transparency, and let's do this. Let's start selecting some zones there, and not always the same size, not always evenly placed like this. Do that maybe from another side also there. Then with shift you can remove some if you want. Here, add again here, add, remove with the shift key in edit mode. So we have this, and I'm going to delete with the suppress key or the delete key on your keyboard. Then we delete the vertices. So we have this. And now what we're going to do also is that we're going to take on this side a row of vertices and another row on the other side. Here, these two rows, and make an F. This creates a face that go through and through. And let's do that a couple of times. One row on this side, then with shift on the other side and control to select the row, and F to close the face. And maybe another one from here. So with you select the vertex, then with control to the last one, so it selects the row. Then here the shift key, so you don't lose the first selection. Then with control there you have one row and two rows, and F. Okay, so this is the geometry, and beware of something, that here the Boolean is failing because the result is solid right there. Okay, so the Boolean is not working. Not with the fast solver, not with the exact solver, because this is not a closed solid. So let's go to edit mode. Let's select everything. Let's extrude the E key on your keyboard and scale and make it smaller. So now everything has some thickness. Exit edit mode, and we can see now that the Boolean is perfectly working. If the Boolean still doesn't work on the extruded solid, put a remesh modifier before the Boolean and tweak the voxel size to the resolution that works for you here, there. Okay, that tends to solve all Boolean problems. Okay, now this geometry is going to use the 4 quartz inner flaws. Let's have a look at it on this geometry. Okay, so this is going to make the flaws on a smaller geometry in the bead here. Let's rotate here. So we can see this is a second layer of cracks, and they look really good. Okay, so if I remove this bead here from render, we can see that the first layer of the amethyst quartz have some bumps. It's pretty nice, but now we already have a second layer of inclusions. These are pretty common flaws inside the quartz, inside the citron quartz and the amethyst quartz and many other type of quartz. Okay, so this is one layer. Then we have a second layer. It means that we can create in the same fashion. We're going to create a second type of geometry to apply the other type of flaws and get the full quartz look, to get the best realism. And that's the main reason why I created this asset, to provide the most professional looking materials for jewelers and amateurs as well, and beginners also. That's why we're here. So let's keep learning how to use this asset. Okay, so now let's take the original bead again. Let's make a new copy, Shift D. That's how you make a copy in Blender, Shift D on your keyboard. Let's go to edit mode, transparency, Alt Z or X rays, scale with S, and let's make it smaller here. So now we're going to do something very similar. We're going to make it look different. So you know the process, select around here, around there. Let's start deselecting with Shift. The C selection is with the C key on the keyboard. Okay, we have this. Let's erase this, delete vertices. Now again, I'm going to take a row here with Control. On the other side down there, Shift, Control, F. That's one face. Now let's make one here. So let's take here at the front. Here with Control, then on the front there, Control, Shift and Control there. Okay, we have this and maybe one here higher here with Control, then Shift, Control and F. Okay, we have this. So here the Boolean is working. I don't need to make it solid with the extrusion and then the remesh or not. The Boolean is working. We can see that. So this one is going to be for all quartz. The second layer is the internal colorations. Here we are. Let's have a look at this layer on its own here. So now let's make a general view to see all the layers together in action. Okay, and here we are. We have the crack effects. So we have the external layer making the general color and some bumps. We have the second layer making some cracks. And the third layer is making other type of cracks with more colorations. So let's go to shading. Now we have all the geometry. So we can tweak this. This one is the second layer. So here, this is the second layer of coloration. Maybe I don't want that much coloration here. I can remove that. Maybe I want a pinker type of coloration on the inside. Here we can see if you want some quartz actually are called ametrino quartz. The ametrino quartz is a mix between citrine and amethyst. So here with this asset, and that's why I made it like this, so you can tweak whatever you need. And here we have the ametrino quartz because the inner bead is making the color. Now here, something important. I showed a very quick method to model this geometry. So maybe, let's go to edit mode. Maybe you don't want these sharp angles. So what you can do, let's select everything. Let's go to the W menu here and let's go to randomize vertices. Okay, so we're going to randomize this and the amount. Something like this maybe. And something important, I don't want it to come out of the bead. So let's scale it back down. But now we have only triangles, okay? Everything is on the inside and the Boolean. So now the Boolean is failing again, okay? Because the cutter is coming out as a solid. So like I said, let's remesh before the Boolean, and now the Boolean is working. So now I get rid of the square aspect of my geometry. So now let's tweak it back to something. Maybe I want some pink, lighter pink here, not that strong here, something like this. Okay, so this is the amethyst bead with all the layers working together to achieve the quartz look, and that gives us many options. So obviously now I want the bead to be the citrine quartz. So let's put the citrine quartz to the outside bead. And on the inside, well, now I can tweak. Maybe I want it more yellow and I want it lighter. So here we are. And remember that the second bead has the same imperfection. So let's go to edit mode, select everything, W key for menu, randomize vertices. Here you can affect the strength. Okay, and let's stay on the inside right here. So scale it down and here. What I'm going to do is add a remesh also on this second level. Remesh before the Boolean right there. Okay, so now I have this. So now we can see if we hide from the preview, we can see who's making what. Thanks for purchasing my assets. That is the most important part of my work most of the time with the tutorials. I do 3D models also. So thanks for supporting my work. I hope that this video answered all your questions. Have a good one. Take care and see you soon.